Alrighty, we're going to get started now. So this is the Eileen Fisher Building and Infrastructure for the Future webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have Eileen Fisher here with us on this webinar. We have Nelson Diaz and Travis Laird who are here and are going to talk us through their decision-making process and their network, and we'll get really into the weeds with their deployment. But really quick introduction to myself. My name is Rachel. I am a product marketing manager here at Meraki. And before I go any further, I also want to call out that I have my colleague Deanna in the room with me today, and she is going to be able to answer any and all questions that you might have during the webinar. So as those questions pop into your head, please feel free to type them into the chat box, the Q&A box, and we'll get those answered. We're also going to do our very best to leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end of this webinar to do Q&A with myself as well as Nelson and Travis so that you can answer or you can ask them questions as well. So feel free to just type away throughout the whole webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. In today's webinar, we're going to go through a brief introduction to Meraki and a really high-level overview of the technology for those who are completely new to the Meraki solution. We're going to go over why cloud-managed IT has benefits over sort of your traditional architectures. The vast majority of this webinar is going to be spent talking to our Eileen Fisher representatives here and getting into really what their network looks like and what their experience has been with Meraki. We'll go through a demo of their dashboard as well, and then I'm just going to recap on some of our product families, and then we'll do that Q&A that I mentioned. So a little bit of background on Cisco Meraki, who we are and what we do. We are a cloud-managed IT company. So we don't say cloud-managed networking anymore because we've really broadened beyond just the core networking stack, which many of you may be more familiar with. So of course, we started back in 2006 as a wireless solution. We started as a grad student research project out of MIT. Those students were figuring out a better way to deploy mesh wireless throughout the city of Boston. And as they were reporting on their findings, an investor actually just offered them some money to start a company, and that's how Meraki was born. So since then, we've of course added 5 more product lines to our lineup. So we have now a UTM firewall appliance, we have switching, we have a SaaS application monitoring tool, we have our endpoint management tool, and we have security cameras as well. So it's a big breadth of products, and we're really the only place that you're going to find that breadth of products. The unifying theme amongst all of them, whether they're hardware or software, is that they're going to be an integrated sort of all-in-one package. So we take care of the hardware, the software, and the cloud services for you. You don't have to buy all these little disparate pieces of infrastructure in order to get your operation working. So whether it's an access point or a security camera, you're not going to need any on-site controllers or servers or NVRs, what we call the extra boxes. We really eliminate those from the equation. So a really good example of how this works is you can order a bunch of access points, a bunch of cameras, and a bunch of firewalls and have them shipped directly to a branch location, pre-configure them before they even arrive on site. And once they arrive, you can plug them in and they'll pull down their configuration from the cloud, and they'll just start working. So it's really quick, it's extremely scalable, of course, which is really fantastic for retailers who have sort of these big deployments across the country or across the world, and it's just less for you to have to worry about. So we, of course, were acquired by Cisco back in 2012. So it's been quite a while now that we've been a part of the Cisco family, and that's really been the catalyst that's helped us expand much more rapidly and broaden our reach to many more customers. So we now have well over 250,000 unique customers. We have over 3.5 million Meraki devices online and over 5.5 million active Meraki dashboard users, which is kind of a staggering number to look at, but we're really proud of it. So how does the technology actually work? We keep saying cloud IT, but cloud is like still a little bit of a fuzzy word, so I kind of want to talk through how the architecture actually works for our various products. So if you look at the diagram on the right, basically what's happening is you have your your local network, your LAN, that has all of our devices sort of set up in that. your user traffic is never actually going to go through the cloud. So what the cloud is actually doing in this case is managing all of the configuration and management data. So only that metadata is going to go to our cloud, and none of the user traffic is actually going to pass through that. So it's really secure, and any concerns you might have about privacy, because that's a really, of course, a hot button issue these days, you're not going to have to worry about that with the Meraki solution. So the cloud really provides this intuitive solution. Of course, everything's managed through our browser-based dashboard. So you just run it through Safari, Chrome, whatever your browser of choice is, and you're not going to have any command line interface to interact with. So that means our dashboard is going to be really simple and easy to use, and all of our products, once again, are cloud hosted, so there's no on-site servers. It's extremely scalable, like I mentioned. There's no bottlenecks in our architecture, so whether you're adding one site location with 10 access points or 1,000 site locations around the world with thousands of access points, it's really not going to feel much different in terms of setup. So you can add those devices extremely quickly, and they'll come online in a matter of minutes instead of hours or days that it might normally take to get that set up. Our solution is extremely reliable. We have redundant data centers all around the world, so the benefit of working with a company that's been around for 12 years now is that we have the infrastructure globally to support a multinational company or brand. So you don't have to worry about that. We make sure that we comply with all the regulations in the given geography that that data center is in. So that is all, again, taken care of on our end. We have 4 nines of uptime, kind of expected in today's world, but of course worth reiterating that it is just a very reliable solution. One note here that people often ask about if you're new to sort of the cloud IT architecture is what happens if I lose my connection to the cloud. I want to address that head on. So if you do lose your connection to the cloud, nothing will happen. Your network, your LAN will still continue to operate as it should, because your products are going to cache their most recent configuration settings. Now, you won't be able to do any sort of extensive configuration while your cloud connection is disrupted, but we do have some local configurations. If you are in a pinch, you can update some of those. But in order to regain your access to sort of the full configuration settings, you will need to regain your connection to the cloud. But in the interim, you don't have to worry about your network, just going kaput on you or anything like that. Again, very secure solution. All of our devices work to create HIPAA and PCI compliant networks. We're level 1 certified. We have third-party security audits. And one of the great things about the cloud architecture is that we have automatic firmware and security updates. So you can user schedule these, of course, if you have a really massive deployment and you want to make sure you're not disrupting any mission-critical workflow. But if there are any threats or attacks that come through, WannaCry is a really great example of this that, of course, actually happened a couple years ago. We're really able to get in there and fix the problem much more quickly than you would with any other non-cloud-based solution. So in the example of WannaCry, our engineers went in, the morning that broke. They came in, just updated the database of malicious, IPs and hosts and that kind of thing, and pushed that out. It actually wasn't even like a firmware update for our customers. They just, had protection all of a sudden. So they didn't even really have to do anything on their end. They could just rely on us to take care of them in that case. So if you do have any other questions about reliability and security, you can definitely check out meraki.cisco.com/trust. We have a whole page built out dedicated to making sure that you understand how understanding our security measures. So, just getting at the heart of sort of the challenges that IT teams are facing more and more today, and how the cloud IT solution sort of handles those challenges. You guys are probably even more familiar with these challenges than I am, but of course there's literally billions of mobile devices in the world today, and that number is only increasing more and more rapidly, which is really hard to wrap your head around. But having that integrated mobility management, being able to keep all of those mobile devices secure from a single place is going to be really big, especially for a national or multinational brand. Of course, this is, sort of old news at this point, but we've really transitioned to a world of streaming rich HD video and other types of media. So the days of downloading MP3 files are completely behind us, and so in order to keep up with all of this new streaming behavior, we need to make sure that you're able to use Layer 7 application shaping in order to just streamline that operation much more efficiently. And of course, new business opportunities are always popping up, and I think this is one of the biggest potential gains for retailers in particular, is that we provide some analytics tools just built into our product that don't cost extra, and that's really going to let you engage with your customers in a different way and really understand your customers in a different way. So the more that you can do that, the more you can interact and understand those customers, obviously, the better it is for the bottom line. So that stuff never hurts. But the point that I want to drive home is that this is a complete solution out of the box. There's no extra hardware to install. There's no extra software to install. And we really make sure that we reduce the complexity involved in these types of solutions. So let's get into the good stuff. So Nelson and Travis are joining me from Eileen Fisher, of course, a really well-known brand, well-loved brand. Deanna's nodding her head in the room. She really loves Eileen Fisher, so we have her seal of approval here. So brief introduction to the team here. Nelson Diaz is the Senior Manager of IT Infrastructure at Eileen Fisher and the #4 employee, which is pretty cool. We have Travis Laird as well, who is the architect and has been with Eileen Fisher for 15 years. I don't know if one of you wants to talk through the really high level what your infrastructure team looks like and just your general deployment looks like.
Yes, hi, this is Nelson. Thank you for the introduction there. The infrastructure team is big. We have a 2.5 person, and I call it 2.5 because it consists of myself, my direct report, and then Travis Laird, who is our brain, I would call him. But Travis Laird is really the person who configure and have managed for us our entire infrastructure, and including the Meraki. So a typical deployment consists of utilizing ourselves and of course vendors, and we rely heavily on the support from our vendors and stuff, and have to do a lot with mapping the right plan in place.
Great. Can you kind of talk to, there's some numbers on the slide here. You guys have 1,500 users. Can you kind of talk through what that group of users looks like? Who's actually interacting with this on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day, we have actually, we have a help desk department that handle the day-to-day communication with the user, but all of these users, one way or another, communicate through our infrastructure via whether it's for voice or for data, including all of our retail locations and wholesale locations.
Awesome. So let's get into sort of what some of your challenges were before you went with Meraki, and what you guys were really facing. So can you kind of talk us through some of those challenges that sort of led you in the direction of Meraki?
Yes. So Meraki came to us by mainly by Travis Laird, who has done all the research. We have partner also with another vendor who helped us get into that area, Presidio. And I will ask Travis now to interject and keep us honest as to how he helped us get into this trend of getting to Meraki from the environment that we had in place.
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. My name is Travis. Like Nelson said, I've been working with Nelson and Eileen Fisher for quite a while now. So just to give you a little bit of background on how we ended up with Meraki. So, you know, as stated, Nelson's been with Eileen Fisher since, well, almost as long as Eileen Fisher. I started working with Eileen Fisher on various projects quite a while back, so we've seen quite a few technology platforms kind of come and go at Eileen Fisher as things have changed over the last couple of decades. We've ventured into SD-WAN scenario about 6 years ago with a third party that we had engaged to work with us on what was initially a PCI project. At the same time, we were looking to improve availability at our retail location. So we spent about 6 to 9 months working with them on a platform that, again, was originally tailored around security and PCI compliance, but was basically a white box network device. We worked with them to build multipathing, to build redundant ISP support, as well as connectivity failover and pretty rudimentary traffic prioritization capabilities. So we rolled that out about, again, like I say, about 5-6 years ago. A little bit of a bumpy ride. Again, it was a proprietary solution at the time, but we were able to get the job done with that. We started looking for alternatives about 2 years ago, given the lifespan of that equipment, some of the support challenges, because that was sort of a customized solution that, again, we had worked with that vendor on. There was a lot of limitations in terms of monitoring, configuration management, just general visibility for us. So we felt a little handcuffed a lot of the time with trying to support that and maintain a reliable infrastructure. So did an assessment of the market. I think I started probably the way a lot of you guys did. I did some of the webinars. At the time, we weren't limiting the free equipment to consultants. So I did some of the webinars, got a set of gear. We could actually take various different webinars and get an MX as well as an AP, as well as a switch. So I was able to build a little lab there. As soon as I got into the experience, really enjoyed what I was able to see there. Not just the configuration management capabilities, but just the visibility in general to data. What was going on my network, who was connected, some of the integrated support capabilities, being able to do cable tests and identify, devices connected to ports and things like that, which we had lost that ability with this third-party solution. So it really kind of lined up for us. I think some things had matured around Meraki. We were at a point where we needed to deal with replacing that sort of aging infrastructure and that limited capability, limited infrastructure, and that's how we got into the Meraki space.
And Travis, can you kind of elaborate? You mentioned you had this proprietary solution and it wasn't very easy to work with, and you felt handcuffed. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that actual sort of day-to-day process would look like if you did need to go in and make any fixes or changes?
Yeah, well, exactly. So having been in this industry for quite a while, I've done a lot of medium and large-scale deployments, a lot of Cisco, native Cisco type gear, ASAs and Catalysts and all the stuff that we all work with, Nexus, so on. This particular device, because of the requirements of these retail locations where we were originally deploying these, relatively small footprint, none of that type of equipment really fit the bill there. This proprietary solution really became a sort of a black box to us, which was pretty painful. Having visibility and configuration control to some of that equipment that we've worked with historically, and losing that meant that we were really at the mercy of the vendor to deal with anything. That was just a lot of time spent in the ticket system and harassing the support line, et cetera, to try and get things resolved. We literally had limited access to these devices, and that was essentially a read-only. We could see some statistics data on a CLI basis, but that was the extent of it. There was no visibility to configuration. We couldn't make any changes, et cetera. So that's where we literally were kind of handcuffed here in that situation.
Which is why we call it a black box, right? I mean, that's not the name of it, just that we call it a black box because to us was that it was black, and it was very nervous-some for us. For me, it's specifically to deploy something that I had no control of, and like I stated, crossing my finger is not a way to do business.
Awesome. So let's get into sort of what you guys actually went with when you switched over to the Meraki solution. You guys obviously have a pretty comprehensive portfolio of Meraki products now, which makes us really excited, of course. But can you kind of talk through what the steps were in choosing these different solutions, how they've worked out for you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So So we kind of knew what the the profile of these locations that we're dealing with look like, obviously, because we've been operating for quite a while. We initially ventured in to just really look at doing a one-for-one replacement to provide switching, edge security, as well as wireless. The demands on wireless continue to change, which I'm sure they have for everybody. When we initially deployed wireless with that preceding solution, it was really an off-the-shelf access point that they had customized the firmware on. The scope of the use case there was really for guest internet access. Things have changed over time. We were actually starting to run more line of business applications over wireless, so having that sort of off-the-shelf commodity equipment really wasn't cutting it either. So we initially started with basically an MS, an MX, and an MR, right? A wireless, a switch, and a firewall. At our head end, we ended up deploying larger MXs. We started out with hundreds and then went up to 400s, but that became our hub location, which was located back at our primary on-premise data center. And we essentially marched down through that stack of 70 or so locations and swapped out that equipment site by site. And I'll tell you, the experience was quite different. When we went through the first round of doing this with that previous solution, it was experience I think probably all of us have had at some point. It was 4 or 5 different parties on a bridge for 4 hours with an on-site tech and going through console cables and all that fun stuff to get things resolved. When we went to Meraki, that experience changed significantly. So being able to sort of stage those configurations, drive things with templates, et cetera, helped us out quite a bit. We actually got to a point where I think, Nelson, you did a few of these yourself independently in less than 30 minutes with just yourself and an on-site tech, which that really speaks to the opportunity here and the difference between what we had to deal with before and what we're able to do now. At this point, when we provision new sites, because we drive a lot of things, most of our configurations are all based on various templates. We actually have an engineer on the team, the third person in that 3-person list, and he deals with most of that sort of day-to-day site provisioning himself at this point. So then just escalation and things like that bubble up to me. So we had real good success with that. We expanded into our main corporate locations. So we actually have 3 main corporate locations around the New York, New Jersey area. Marketing, finance, all those corporate groups. That's where they reside, design, et cetera. We migrated over to MXs, MX250 specifically at those sites in HA, and that ended up replacing MPLS throughout our enterprise. I'd say probably 99%. And also, I think we have a couple of remaining locations where we're still using MPLS, but only as a backup connection. So we're actually tunneling Meraki over that MPLS connection as a secondary. So we're real close, just finding a few remaining ISPs to eliminate that.
I'd like to emphasize that the reason for that is specifically related to not having a secondary reliable ISP, so that's why we stay with that. And like you said, Travis, Ellen, when we planned the deployment of the Meraki, we thought of what we went through with the prior technology that we had in place, and we thought of 2 sites per week. We were able to do 5 sites on some point per week. So the minimum was 3 per week that we deploy, which reduced the amount of time of deployment dramatically. Also the cost involvement dramatically. We literally needed just hands and eyes at the site to mount the equipment.
I think that we had sort of logistically scheduled this out through early 2019, taking into account some of the our main corporate locations, and we actually sped it up. We actually completed that cutover in August, so up through our 3 main sites. And then just to talk a little bit about some of the couple other things that are going on in Meraki space, we started an integration project with Amazon Web Services, which everybody's kind of in the same boat, I'd imagine, either going to AWS or Azure. So we started a hybrid project with cloud last year as well. We just recently deployed the VMXs, which is the virtual MX, into AWS, into our 3 availability zones, and we're actually planning and coordinating around making the necessary routing changes to switch our VPN connectivity over from the VGW, CGW configs that are part of AWS to Meraki. Not that the existing technology is not reliable, but the benefit from the visibility and the traffic monitoring, so on, that we get from the dashboard is really a driver for making that switch and going VMX away from the built-in capabilities.
Awesome. So let's, you just mentioned a lot of great stuff. So let's move along here. I really want to get to the demo because your guys' dashboard is really, encapsulates all of that functionality really well. So really quickly hashing over some of the actual tangible benefits you guys have seen, which you can see the numbers right here are really fantastic. If one of you kind of wants to talk us through this.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I thought Travis was going to say something. So I think we already mentioned this, right? So with the deployment time was cut dramatically. The cost saving was significantly, as you can see it here. And the one cost that we're going to end up with once we migrate everything into SD-WAN, as Travis mentioned, we already done our primary locations, which is, the corporate location. That has significantly improved our environment, not only by reducing the cost of the MPLS, and using SD-WAN, but by providing the company with more bandwidth. As you know, you can get a gigabit internet connection via fiber for a very good price. So we utilizing the Cisco Meraki and being able to see this and test it every day, and in the sense of seeing that it is being utilized and be able to produce report out of it, it has been a significant improvement to the overall infrastructure.
Yeah,
so the saving cannot even, speak to the value that we are truly getting.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I mean, we love hearing that from our customers, of course, and I think one thing that you guys are getting at here is, these numbers sort of speak for themselves, but one really big benefit of Meraki is sort of the total cost of ownership of a deployment. It's not just, like the face value, bill of materials that you get on day one, of course, but all of these rolled up costs that you guys are obviously seeing benefits covering, all different cost areas that you might not normally think to include when you're factoring that, that initial bill of materials in. So that's really fantastic to hear.
Agreed.
So, moving forward to the future, something that Meraki's, really keen on is making sure that we're, quote unquote, future-proofing our customers' networks and their IT deployments. And so we wanted to hear how you guys are sort of planning for the future with Meraki and what your deployment's going to look like as you move forward.
Good question, and we kind of touched a little bit already by saying that we will move in our couple locations, in which we have completed already, as Travis mentioned. The next thing here that we're looking to set up is the failover over to G3, G4 at our retail locations to compensate those areas in which we don't have a secondary ISP or a good secondary ISP. We're looking to do that in sometime in 2019. We're in the process of putting that plan together. The expectation very, very simple. Now that we have the experience of the deployment that we completed with Meraki, is basically getting the G4 devices and deploy them to the stores. We also looking at utilizing, possibly talking to the business about utilizing the cameras at the stores, not necessarily for theft prevention, it's more for security reasons. Go ahead, Travis. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit too about, like I said, we were looking at the VMX to really fully integrate our entire WAN, including our cloud infrastructure, into the Meraki experience. One of the projects that I'm excited about as well, we're planning a migration of our wireless infrastructure at our main corporate location. So again, those 3 main sites that house roughly 1,000 users or so. We'll be moving from the current solution over to Meraki Wireless and integrating Systems Manager, which will give us improvements in identity and access, authentication and access control, and allow us to move past some of the legacy and frankly costly infrastructure we have there around maintaining our own certificate authorities, and we also use ICE, which I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but we use ICE for AAA. So there's various pieces that we've had to administer and support internally that we'll be replacing with this Meraki solution. I think we'll actually end up getting rid of 6 or 7 infrastructure servers that perform different roles as part of that migration. So that's a plan as well for next year.
Awesome.
Travis, can you also mention about the fact we're going to be able to manage the mobile devices and so?
Yeah, right. And that's another part of the conversation. Systems manager, my primary objective around it is really for the authentication and access control. We actually use a different MDM solution today, so we're going to replace that as well with Systems Manager. So we're really unifying, a lot of aspects of our corporate infrastructure around the Meraki platform, just because the solution is, the capability is so broad, and we're able to bring that all in. So we've had an initiative for a few years to simplify. Nelson and I just kind of talk about it, fewest number of moving pieces scenario. So historically we've had to pull different components from different vendors to provide a comprehensive solution to things like I talk about the wireless with 802.1x and all the pieces to that puzzle. Getting rid of all of that and centralizing, bringing MDM into the picture, bringing cameras and security surveillance into the picture, as well as all of our network connectivity and edge security into one solution is really fit the bill for us. That was one of the other positives when we started looking at the portfolio of products when we were looking for replacement vendors.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to a great point, which is you can start with just Meraki wireless or just Meraki switching, whatever piece of your infrastructure you need to update, but it's really great to know that as you refresh the rest of your infrastructure, you're going to have those options available to you. And on top of that, Meraki just keeps growing. Our product line just keeps expanding, so you'll probably have more stuff in the future to think about as well.
Yeah, I mean that's real quick. That's true. I mean, it's when I log into the dashboard and I see the little flags show up about a new feature or something like it's like Christmas every couple of weeks.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, which is that our teams are always innovating, whether it's a new hardware release, which of course is going to happen a little bit more slowly, or a dashboard feature update, which happens much more quickly. I often joke that I'm actually one of the people who writes some of those dashboard updates, and sometimes I can't even keep up with what the engineers are putting out, right? It's happening so quickly. So it's great to hear that, it feels like Christmas every couple of weeks, because we hear that from a lot of our customers. So without further ado, let's just dive into your guys' dashboard, because I think that's really going to illustrate a lot of the points you guys have been talking about. And of course, I got signed out. So let me hop back in here really quickly. All right, so we are now in your dashboard. So you guys obviously have lots of templates as well as lots of different networks. So I'm going to do a really quick 2-minute overview of how the dashboard works for those who are really new to it, and then we'll dive right into sort of what you guys want to cover in terms of SD-WAN and templating and all that fun stuff. So starting out on this, we'll just grab one of these networks here. So we can see across the top, which template this network is using, for instance. The main thing I want to point out is that this menu on the left-hand side sort of illustrates what Travis has been talking about, which is really having a centralized view of all of your different products from a single place, right? So as you guys have been adding, your switching and your wireless and different pieces of the infrastructure here, they just kind of auto-populate into this menu. So as your infrastructure grows, this menu just sort of gets a little bit longer, and you're able to see everything at a glance. I'm going to just jump over to the clients page really quickly to show sort of some of the day-to-day functionality. We have really the basics here, so you can see all the clients that are connecting to the network. We can see bandwidth usage over time, and of course we can change that time frame that we're looking at. One really great thing is this application wheel across the top here that's going to show us which Layer 7 applications are being used and at, which percentage of your bandwidth is being attributed to that particular application. So you get really great visibility there. Of course, we can expand that and kind of sort by usage. and drill down into problematic devices, and we can actually even, block a client device or send them a notification or throttle them, whatever you need to do. So the other thing I want to show really quickly is the overview page, and this gives a great sort of global view for a company like Eileen Fisher that has tons of networks. So I just want to show what the map looks like. So we can actually see all the different store locations or office locations. If we hover over these little circles here, we can see exactly which networks we are looking at, and we give a really high-level sort of overview of the health of that particular network, right? So we can drill down from this global view and really see, why is this store orange? I'm not going to get into that here, but it just gives you a really quick overview of what's happening there. So that's just the really, really high-level stuff. There's, tons of other basic functionality as well, but I want to spend time on sort of the nitty-gritty of what Eileen Fisher is doing with their network, because you've been hearing about all this cool stuff. So I'm not sure if Travis or Nelson, which one of you wants to walk through the dashboard with me, but is there somewhere you wanted to start in terms of functionality?
Yeah, I think we can talk about templates a little bit. So that was pretty important to me. I don't like repetitive tasks. I didn't want to deal with trying to keep all of these 70-plus locations somewhat in sync, et cetera. So templating was pretty critical. It was one of the first things I started looking at when we started trying to define how we were gonna roll this out. We started with a single template for retail stores, and we evolved that into sort of regional templates. There's still a gap in keeping those regional templates synchronized, so we're looking at some of the API capabilities maybe to do that, but we ended up breaking it out into regions so that we could do things like change the maintenance schedules, rollout changes. Obviously, we don't want to push one button to 70 retail stores and take down everything at once. So we start with a lab. We maintain a lab environment, which represents a retail store. That's where we do all of kind of our development work. So if we're going to deal with configuration changes, et cetera, they start there. Then we have a pilot group that's driven by a template. We roll that change out to a pilot store, and those are geographically close, so that if there is some sort of a issue that's derived from that, we can actually physically get there. And then we start going about it regionally, and we use those as well for things like the firmware rollouts. So we don't let Meraki just push it all at whenever they want. We try to schedule those and roll them in phases out through through the templates, basically by changing the update schedules on that. So templates were a pretty big deal for us. So everything that we roll out, minus the sort of the data center, the one-offs, the data center and the main corporate sites, is tied to a template. That basically means that provisioning a new location literally takes maybe 60 seconds. We create a new network off of that template. In our case, the templates are built to auto assign subnets, which we don't do. So we have to override that setting in the template. But that's it. Everything else comes out of the template. We don't even have to have the equipment yet. So anybody that's worked with Meraki before, we can actually build the network and then assign the devices to it. And then once they get plugged in, they call home, get their configs, cycle themselves, and come back up ready to go. So templates is probably one of the favorites. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think like your guys, the way that you have your template set up, it's really clear that you've put a ton of thought and planning into how these different templates are operating and sort of what phase each network is going to roll into as you're rolling out these templates. So I think that's a great sort of lesson to those who may be listening in that are just starting out with their deployment or are just sort of considering moving over to the Meraki solution. But in terms of how that actually looks, you can see here I've sort of been highlighting that in the left-hand menu here, we see our templates across the top, and then below that are the actual networks that are binding to the template. So in terms of creating a template, all you have to do is sort of create that network and of course, adjust those settings. And then we can see here that each particular template network, we can see which networks are bound to that template. So, if I select these, I can bind them, I can unbind them. I obviously can't make any changes here because we're just looking at this, and I'm not going to, but it's really easy to do. Like Travis said, it takes, 60 seconds or so to do that. So from here, you guys want to dive into some of the SD-WAN stuff, because I know that that is a huge sort of topic of conversation, especially amongst retailers. So do you have,
in terms of what do you mean in terms of diving into the SD-WAN?
Yeah, so do you have a template or do you have a network that would be a good highlight to show sort of how you guys configure your SD-WAN settings that I can jump into?
Yeah, these are all, so all of these sites are connected via SD-WAN. So right now, that's part of the template. Site comes up, it becomes a spoke. Our data center is the hub. So yeah, we replaced the private MPLS WAN with Meraki SD-WAN. I don't think we have any. We have no siloed sites. So all of these are connected via SD-WAN. So if you actually want to go to organization VPN status, so all of the sites are connected. This is showing obviously latency and data usage and so on. But the up at the top there, you'll see the data center 500. That's just our site ID. Elmsford, New York. That's our hub. And then all of those other little lines are all the various stores. If you haven't seen this graph before, it scales the little part of the pie there based on utilization. Yeah, they're all built and enabled for SD-WAN.
Yeah, so I wanted to quickly show sort of what that process is like to set up SD-WAN because it's so quick. So I'm going to hop over to the traffic shaping setting on the security appliance template. So do you want to kind of talk through the configuration settings that you've set up here? It's pretty straightforward, but it's worth mentioning how it works.
Yeah. So I mean, again, the traffic shaping. This is just setting WAN throughput limits. We match those to whatever the providers are. Want to maybe scroll down a little bit. There's options here for how do you want to use the links, whether they're load balancing or they're failover. And then prioritization. So voice traffic, pretty common one there. We've obviously got a preference for our WAN 1 link on that. WAN 2 would be the backup, which in some cases is DSL, some cases is the legacy MPLS, which is usually only a meg and a half circuit. So obviously not the greatest path for that type of traffic.
Are you guys using any custom performance classes across any of your templates or networks?
Not currently. So we're starting to dive into optimization, both on the wireless and the wired side. So we've been pretty heads down with getting the rollout done of things. And through our initial analysis, voice was really kind of the most sensitive piece of traffic that we have. Most of the remote sites. We virtualize our applications, so we use Citrix and other technologies for that. So a lot of the traffic's lightweight, so we haven't had a need at this point to get farther into some of the optimization of traffic flow.
Yeah, so that's something maybe down the road. I just wanted to call out for those who are wondering about that you absolutely can set your own sort of thresholds for failover in the SD-WAN tool. So you can define a custom performance class and define those thresholds for jitter and latency and loss. And there's different types of preferred uplink settings that you can direct towards. So it can even be whichever uplink is currently performing better can be an option that you can select as well. So obviously don't need to do that, but that is just an option that's available there as well. Time flies when you're having fun, right? So we are already getting close to the end of this. I do want to save time for questions. Is there maybe one more tool or feature that you just might want to show everyone that's watching here that's a really big time saver that you love?
Yeah, well, you were real quick though. You were talking about just where the SD-WAN setup is. Or if you want to, what location CA retail store group 1. If you can go to maybe security appliance, and then site to site VPN, and that's pretty much how you have it there, right? So we've got, so this is a retail store group. So these guys are spoke locations. We've got a single hub right now. That'll change, like I said, with the integration of the VMX with AWS. We'll have 3 separate regional AWS hubs as well. But that's how you essentially enable this site to establish an SD-WAN connection back to a hub location. And then the local network section allows you to filter out some of the networks. Obviously, I'm not going to advertise my guest network out over the VPN, so that's a little no option there in the use VPN. But it's basically that simple. I mean, there's not much more to it.
Awesome.
Yeah, that said, some of the other things that I like is really under the organization section. Some of the simple things, change log. Who's making changes to things. We're a relatively small team, but most of us are working somewhat independent. This gives us some visibility to what things are getting touched. There's pretty comprehensive alerting built in here. So Nelson and I get change alerts. So we just kind of keep tabs. Those come as emails. So that's helpful. I like that audit trail behind things. The overview we already looked at. The summary report under organization is something that's interesting to me. That I like to kind of keep tabs on the overview of things. So I actually have this set up and scheduled for email delivery every day. So I get a copy of this in the morning. It's over my coffee. I take a look at the summary report, just looking for anomalies, things that we may need to pay attention to, where we may need to invest some more time in tuning or troubleshooting, et cetera. So reporting, the visibility really, I keep going back to that, but the visibility was a huge win for us. We have other tools that we use internally and have for years. We're starting to reduce our dependency on those to the point where we'll be potentially eliminating some of those other monitoring and configuration management tools in the next year as well, and really focusing everything on this sort of single pane of glass.
Awesome. So I'm going to hop over to back to the slides here. So obviously we could share different aspects of your dashboard all day because you guys have a really fantastic setup there. But in the interest of time, I'm going to hop over to these slides and see if we have any questions on the line before I wrap up. So let me see if there's any questions for myself, Travis, or Nelson. So 1 second here. So there's a question about content filtering. Do you guys use content filtering, and if so, in what capacity?
So we don't in here, but we're looking at, so we were traditionally a CWS customer, so Cisco Web Security, which has moved to Umbrella or is in the process of moving to Cisco Umbrella, which integrates with Meraki. So it's actually something on our to-do list to look at that integration further. And try to couple those two. So today, all of our endpoints we deploy the agents for content security to them, but we're looking to take that up to the Meraki level through that integration with Cisco Umbrella.
Awesome. There's another question about sort of the general setup for a site location. So how many access points do you have? How many switches do you have? And obviously you mentioned that you have an MX. So what does that typically look like?
Yeah, so retail store is a pretty consistent signature. So it's just one MX, one switch, 48 port PoE, and 1 to 3 access points. So some of our multi-floor stores, it's variable in that range. That's for the retail locations and some of our wholesale or outlet locations as well. Then some of the corporate locations, like we have a learning lab, that's a little bigger facility. That has 2 switches, half a dozen or so access points, again, an MX. Then at our corporate locations, we've got dual MXs for HA. And when we move to wireless at those locations, our current wireless footprint is about 80 access points across those 3 sites. So we'll be scaling up there. Now going forward into 2020, we'll be looking to replace the switching infrastructure as well to go full Meraki end-to-end at those 3 main locations. So that'll really bring everything together in terms of being Meraki end-to-end.
Great. And then I think a follow-up to that slide where we were looking at all of the sort of tangible benefits that you guys have seen, were the cost savings from, curbing your sort of MPLS usage, was that enough to offset the costs incurred from the Meraki upgrade?
I would say it pretty much was. Obviously, partnering with the great Meraki sales rep that we had, Lawrence, and the vendor that we work with, Presidio, and then Travis, who did all the stuff, the saving came through where it was no-brainer with all the benefits that we were getting. And when you're doing this, remember, it's not necessarily about saving. It's about concentrating on what you should. In our case, I like to concentrate on selling clothing, not on technology. I don't want to be worried about middle of the night something not working, right? So that was my big decision in going to that. So what kind of value can you put to that? I don't know, but it's an amazing value to me. I like to me about selling Eileen Fisher clothing, not about whether or not technology is working.
Yeah, and I think that sort of speaks to sort of the long tail operational costs and savings as well. Of course, personally for you, Nelson, not having to wake up in the middle of the night thinking about an issue is fantastic, but in general, I'm going to assume that you guys don't have to send people on site maybe as frequently as you did before.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah. And so that
especially using the templates, you plug them in and, call home and it gets its configuration. That's one of the most amazing things to me.
Right. Yeah, so that adds up over time as well. So that's, a completely separate cost savings that'll build on top of that too.
Yes.
So there's a question about they said, if you're able to share, can you share your cutover strategy as you were switching over to the Meraki solution for each site location?
Travis?
For the retail locations or the main corporate sites?
Maybe both if it's not
we can talk real quickly about a couple of them. So yeah, so in the case of the retail, there's really nothing fancy there, right? I mean, the timeline was small enough where most of those were just scheduled before or after store closing. We had an on-site tech show up, plugged a couple of things in. We sat and watched the stuff come up on the dashboard, and we moved on. We maintained some consistency with the subnet schemes and stuff, so devices didn't have to change too much from that perspective. But it was pretty lightweight in terms of the impact, time commitment, et cetera. So that's all that went on there. The main corporate locations, that was pretty smooth as well. I mean, we pre-configured again. We pre-configured everything. I ended up really just swinging routes over, which took Nelson. I don't know. I think what did I tell you? It took maybe 3-4 minutes to cut over on the main site.
It was an average of 3 minutes, and for the store, I just want to say there was no business downtime whatsoever. This was all done. We budget 2 hours prior to opening, and the average was between the tech arriving and everything being up and running was 45 minutes top. And this is I'm mounting the old equipment, mounting the new equipment into the cabin and things like that. So the Meraki part of it, we took minutes. The moment that it came up online, it pretty much was like, oh, good, we see it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I'm gonna do something crazy and squeeze in one more question here. Sorry guys, we're really people have a ton of questions. So one that I'm interested in and you guys can elaborate on is, are you guys using any of the analytics or wireless functionalities for any sort of like marketing purposes, or do you have any goals to do that in the future?
Not at this time. It's a different vendor. However, that vendor is looking into using the API on Meraki or so. For the analytical of it, but the plan is to eventually also use it for that purpose.
Awesome. So, we are unfortunately out of time here, so I'm going to wrap up on these last couple of slides really quickly. So just recapping on our product families here, we have, of course, our wireless access points. We have our security appliances that obviously Eileen Fisher has been using a ton of. We have our switches, enterprise mobility management tool. We have Meraki Insight, which is our WAN and SaaS application monitoring tool. And then we have our security cameras. So again, you guys just saw how all of that is housed in the same management platform. It's a single pane of glass solution. In terms of next steps, definitely check out our blog. That's where you can learn about the newest feature updates and product releases and all of that stuff. I highly encourage everyone, whether or not you claim your free access point, to try out a risk-free evaluation. And then we have a Meraki community forum where you can ask more questions, get in touch with other Meraki users, and really see how they're using our solutions and learn more. So with that, finishing up just on time, I wanted to thank Travis and Nelson for joining me on today's webinar. Thank you guys so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. And I think your story is really going to help a lot of people who are listening and, make some decisions. So thank you so much for your time.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
And to everyone else, have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining me on today's webinar.